July 30th marks World Day Against Human Trafficking. If you think this is a crime that would have nothing to do with the school bus, think again. Welcome to another episode of The Route, School Bus Fleet's video and podcast series that keeps you in the know. I'm Amanda Huggett, your executive editor. Today we're going to talk about how human trafficking can and does happen in school environments, and how bus drivers can be the key in spotting and reporting it. This episode of The Route is sponsored by IC Bus. The next generation is here and is ahead of its class. Let's get rolling. Globally, about 50 million people are victims of human trafficking. Homeland Security estimates that 77% of all victims are in the forced labor category, and of those, 27% are children. When it comes to sex trafficking victims, 8% are children, and these crimes have been reported in all 50 states. While we most often hear the stories of this happening in places like truck stops or sketchy establishments, it actually could be happening next door, or to a child on the school bus. In fact, according to a 2023 TAT study, over half of school transportation professionals have observed at least one red flag behavior of human trafficking. So let's break down some of the myths and facts about human trafficking and how it may present itself in students who ride the school bus. Plus, how drivers and district staff can be on the lookout for signs and what to do if you suspect it. And we've got one real-life example of how a district in Colorado helped expose a ring a few years ago thanks to the bus driver's observation and intuition. I'm going to bring on two people that you should know who are highly involved in this work to share more about what you should know to be a part of the solution to this heartbreaking problem. Listen in right now. I am joined by Lexi Higgins, Director of Industry Engagement at Truckers Against Trafficking, and Greg Jackson, Director of Client Success and Industry Engagement at School Bus Logistics. Thank you for joining us. We are here today to talk about human trafficking. So not the most upbeat subject, but a very important one. So Lexi, before we get too far into that topic, give us a brief overview. Who is Truckers Against Trafficking, or TAT?
Yeah, so TAT's a nonprofit that works with the transportation industry to combat human trafficking through the course of its members' everyday jobs. And we launched about 16 years ago now and started with a focus on long-haul truckers, right? That's why we're called Truckers Against Trafficking. But since then, we've really grown to include local drivers, like your delivery drivers, your movers, all facets of the bus industry, which is the work that I oversee. So that's your long-distance buses, your public transit, and your school transportation. We also work with the energy industry and all of the ways that it intersects with transportation, shipping and logistics, right? Like pretty much every facet of the ground transportation industry. And essentially our goal is to build a mobile army of professional drivers and other industry members that are equipped to serve as eyes and ears on those roads and throughout our communities that can identify and report human trafficking in the course of their everyday jobs. And to date, we've trained over 2.2 million industry members. So really proud we hit the 2 million mark just at the end of last year, I think. And really excited to just continue building that industry and their knowledge around the issue, right?
Yeah, amazing. So you mentioned a range of industries, and I think when people think about human trafficking, they don't think of the school bus, right? So
Yeah.
how prevalent is it actually in our field? And you have a whole school transportation program, so tell us more about that.
Yeah. When I talk about the work I do, I think the thing that people are most surprised about is our work with school transportation, because it's not always an immediate connection, like you said, because of the some of the misconceptions that a lot of us have around what human trafficking really is and the realities of what it looks like here in our communities. And so the most important message that I always try to get across is that it really is completely possible that a kid could be attending school and riding the school bus while this is going on behind the scenes. And yes, that does mean a kid in your school district, wherever you are. It's not just an international issue, right? It's not just a big city issue. This is really happening in every community across the country. It's happening out in the open, where with the proper training, we can all do something about it. So the definition, right, of human trafficking is essentially, it's a crime where people are bought and sold for forced labor or commercial sex. And so that can be happening in any community, right? And globally, there's an estimated 50 million victims worldwide. And we know that there are thousands of children that are trafficked for sex or labor throughout the US and Canada every single year. And in every single one of those situations, there's that third party, right? There's that trafficker that is profiting off of the sales of those other people. And so the unfortunate reality is that in the case of child trafficking in the US, we know that nearly half of those child trafficking cases have some family member involvement. So it could be a parent, it could be an aunt or an uncle, someone else in the family that is profiting off of that child's exploitation. But what that means is that in those cases especially, it's really possible that that kid is continuing to go to school, continuing to ride the school bus while that's happening behind the scenes by someone that is supposed to be their most trusted person in their life, right? Could also be someone that's posing as a potential romantic suitor or a coach or a mentor or someone else that's trusted in their life. But in all of those cases, they're really probably not using physical force or only physical force to make these kids do these things. They are identifying needs and vulnerabilities in these kids, and what kid doesn't have at least one vulnerability, right? And then they meet those needs. So they say, okay, you don't feel safe at home, I'll give you a safe place to stay. You don't feel like you fit in, I'll make you feel accepted and like you belong. Or you're trying to figure out how to pay for college, I've got a solution for you. And then they flip the script. And so they say, hey, I did all that for you. Now here's what you're going to do for me. You owe me. Or they say, if you really love me, here's how you're going to prove that you love me. Or they say, now I know everything about you. I know where your parents live. I know where your little brother goes to school. And if you don't do what I say, I'm going to go hurt those people that you care about. And so that manipulation, right, can be even more powerful than the physical force. And that's how it's possible that a kid could be going through something like this and still be getting on the school bus every morning and going to school, and certainly likely exhibiting signs of the abuse and trauma while they're doing it. But that manipulation and that coercion that they're experiencing has them in a place where they aren't able to tell anyone and they aren't able to ask for help, but it's still going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. You don't think something like that could happen. It's heartbreaking that it does.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, the burden that these children are carrying is intense. What are some of the signs they might be exhibiting that school bus drivers or transportation teams can watch out for?
Yeah, so school transportation professionals, I mean, I'm preaching in the choir a little bit here, right? But you guys are the link between school and home, right? So uniquely positioned to be able to observe some of these indicators. And I think very rarely are you going to have that like cut and dry situation when it comes to human trafficking of like, I can confidently say that this kid is in a human trafficking situation. They have come to me and said, like, help, I'm a victim of human trafficking. That's just probably never going to happen because of all of those other things that are going on behind the scenes, right? It's also probably not going to be the kid like kicking and screaming, trying to get away from someone, right? Stranger danger is definitely a real thing. But when it comes to trafficking, this is more nuanced, and it's more kids that are going to probably be doing everything that they can to hide what's going on behind the scenes. And so it's really about noticing some subtle signs that could raise red flags around, oh, something needs to be looked into here. And I need to report this because something just doesn't quite feel right. So it could be something as simple as how the child's dressed, right? Are they starting to dress extremely provocatively? Or, this is maybe seeming like a little bit of a cry for help in some ways. Or it could be the opposite. It could be, are they, it's a July day in the middle of summer, it's 90 degrees, and they've got a giant sweater on. What are they trying to cover up? If they're, are they trying to cover up some signs of physical trauma? Are they trying to cover their body because they're feeling shame around that? It could also just be body language. Are there things that are changing in their behavior? Are they more withdrawn than normal? Are they acting a lot more tired than normal? Are they, having temper tantrums, having mood swings, anything that could indicate some trauma going on behind the scenes? Sometimes I say to our school bus partners, it might be the kid that's the biggest pain in the butt on your bus that's going through something behind the scenes. And so are there things that are maybe in their behavior raising some red flags? And then the other thing that I always think is really important to lift up too is because it's not necessarily going to be that kidnapping situation, right? It's going to be that trafficker that's creating a relationship with these kids. There's this period before the exploitation starts, potentially, that is a period of grooming and creating that relationship. And so could that kid start showing up with the latest gadgets, that person is showering them with some gifts and some attention, or they're getting, coming with their nails done or the newest iPhone, and they don't really have an explanation for where that came from, right? They never really had those things before. Now they're showing up with these new things and maybe are hesitant to say where they came from, or, it seems pretty flashy compared to what they usually had. That could be an indicator of that grooming process where someone is giving them these things to try to gain their affection and gain their trust. That can definitely be something. And I always say with all of these situations that, some of those indicators alone could be true of really any, kid or teenager that's riding the bus, right? Mood swings. What teenager hasn't had a mood swing at some point? And so most of these red flags, one alone isn't going to be conclusive that you're dealing with a trafficking situation. And simultaneously, you probably won't see every single indicator in a trafficking situation, right? It's not like, well, you have to get to every single one of these boxes before it's going to be something worth reporting. But they're just some of those nuances that if they start to catch your attention and something doesn't feel quite right, all right, some more questions need to be asked by the proper people in this kid's life, and I need to make a report in that situation, and maybe even just ask, like, hey, is everything okay? What's going on? But definitely to make that report if something just isn't quite feeling right.
Right. So it's really about knowing the kids on your bus and looking for those changes, really being in tune with who they are and what they do.
Yeah.
But so, okay, let's
What
say
your school bus drivers already are, right? Like the school
Right.
bus driver knows their kids, and they know them. You have them year after year for more years than a teacher usually does, right? And so to really know their roots, their routines, already trained to be kind of prone to anything that's a potential threat to safety. It's really about just using those skills that the school bus driver and usually, the monitor and the aide already have in the work that they're doing, and just adding this vocabulary and this tool set to be able to recognize these situations too.
Right. And, the awareness that this could be a thing that's happening.
Right.
I'd imagine folks in probably rural small towns don't think, oh, that doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
But it could.
Yeah.
So let's say someone starts to see a few maybe yellow or red flags, right? How do they go about reporting? So where do they start if they've got a suspicion something's off?
Yep. So some schools, and we at TAT really highly recommend that every school has a policy for how to report and respond to potential human trafficking cases in the school setting, right? I do see that becoming a growing practice in a lot of schools throughout the country, that they have a specific sort of human trafficking protocol. So if that exists, that's what you're going to follow. That's a really easy kind of cut and dry, research it right now before the situation has come up, know it. And if the situation situation comes up, you can follow that protocol specifically. But obviously not every school does have those. And so where you don't, I think it's important to follow your protocols around reporting suspected child abuse. This is a form of child abuse, and so it would be completely relevant to follow whatever protocol is in place, which every school will have a protocol on how to report suspected child abuse, right? And so ultimately, that is the first and foremost. Make sure that you're reporting it through the proper protocols around suspected child abuse. But the other thing that I always recommend to our school transportation partners as they're getting involved in this issue and as they're, more and more, so many of them, I feel like the second that they learn about this, they do become really invested in being a part of the solution, is to just look into who is working on this issue within your school system, because I've had a lot of school transportation partners who had no idea that there were, school guidance counselors or administrators or nurses in the school that were working on school-based anti-trafficking initiatives within their district until they started asking those questions. Because the truth is that oftentimes, because school transportation is off campus, they're often kind of out of the loop on some of those things, right? They're not being included in some of those initiatives. But when they start asking around, they're finding out that, oh, there are some things going on within our school district and resources available within our district. So that's also such a great place to start, and to start now, again, before the issue arises, do a little poking around. What are the resources available? So that when the situation comes up, you're not scrambling to respond, right? You have a plan in place before the report comes in, before the case is at your hands, to be able to do something about it, and to use those people in your school environment that are working on this issue as resources for how to report, but also for training, because they're incredible resources at the local level too. And then a national resource, there is a national human trafficking hotline. They can be a great resource. Again, in the school setting, we always have to report through the reporting protocols within the school around child abuse, but the National Human Trafficking Hotline can be a great place, just a starting point, if you have no idea what else to do, to reach out and find about resources that are local to you as well.
Okay, that's good to know. I think there might be people who are scared to make the report, especially if they're wrong. But, I imagine your approach would be better safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
Is there ever any case to kind of talk to the child itself, maybe ask some questions to see if there's questionable answers? And what about maybe the parent or guardian who might be, at the bus stop with the kid? Do you ever advise asking questions there, or does that raise suspicions?
I think it is a case-by-case basis, right? At the end of the day, what I always say is your school transportation professionals, we at TAT at least, are not asking them to be the social worker, right? Or the investigator or the police officer. And so ultimately it is about, I have noticed a couple of indicators. My responsibility is to make the report and to let the professionals ask the questions. But of course, if you have a relationship with that kid and you're concerned about them, 100% you could just say, hey, is everything okay? Is there anything that you want to tell me? Is everything okay at home? Is anyone making you do something you don't want to do? You can certainly ask those questions. And yeah, if you have a relationship with the parent, same thing, right? You can read the room a little bit and ask some appropriate questions. But for me, at the end of the day, what I always say is it is not your responsibility to get the clear answers, and it is not your responsibility to do the investigations or gather the evidence, right? Or get involved or intervene in any way. It is your responsibility to make that report. And hopefully, and with any kind of report of potential child abuse, right, there is confidentiality around that. The most important role that you're going to play is being those safe eyes and ears that are able to see something and make that report.
Okay, and that's probably a relief for some listeners who they don't want to take that step of trying to figure it out on their own. So.
Yeah. It can be really scary, and it's not your job. They've got so much else going on, So.
Right. Okay. Greg, I want to bring you in now because as I understand, you and your team helped bust a ring that was going on in Colorado, and it did involve, a student who was on the school bus. So tell us exactly what happened and how you responded.
So our situation had started way back in 2000. It's the winter of 2000, actually late fall, early winter of 2016. So I made it a habit to go out to my terminals they have holiday parties and so on. And so a driver and a bus assistant team, they came to me and they kind of reported that they had a young lady on their bus who felt it was more at that time we felt was neglect than it was a human trafficking situation, because the young lady was coming to the bus every morning. It's cold in Colorado. Not this year it was cold. It was, usually we have some decent weather, but it was cold. And so she was coming and she's wearing a very thin sweater or a very thin type of like jacket, and it's cold. So, they were making sure they were ramping up the heat, keeping the student warm. And, they were engaging as much as they could. One thing they were seeing is that this young lady was always alone, but there was always a car in the distance that every time they would go drop her off, there was a car watching to make sure she got on the bus. And then when she got off the bus, they kind of didn't really pay attention until after some other events happened. But what happened from there is, like, we did our protocols, which is contacting, the guardian, right? So what we saw on file, we have to always report this to our guidelines with social services, right? Social services get involved, and what they kind of first stated to us is that it wasn't a situation of pure neglect because the student was going to school, but again, we felt it because of the lack of the right proper clothes, right? So we had a foundation involved, and the foundation was able to, one, produce some clothes that were going to be warm clothes for the student. So a couple of weeks passed, we had a chance to go and get her, two big coats, some vests, gloves, hats, tuck it all, gave it to her, and it was, Merry Christmas, or Happy Holidays, whichever way you like to approach it. And she tucked that with her. She was excited, she was happy, and then we went on to our holiday break. We come back from the holiday break, the young lady comes back with the same clothes she had before, and no longer had the coat, didn't have the vest, didn't have hats and everything else. So the team questioned her and asked her the question, said, what happened? And she said, well, the adults who I live with, gave this to all the rest of the kids who were in the house. So that was strange to them. So they came to me, they communicated to me of the situation because I was involved, because we were part of the foundation found these clothes and getting the warm clothes and everything for them. And then Westland, we got involved with in our district, we had district social workers also, so this student didn't have a case assigned to her. However, we expedited it to them, which when we have something like that, then they kind of give us some steps to what we need to make sure we're paying attention for. One, make sure if they got in contact with this person, we called the person kind of the caretaker. They were kind of corralling the student, and they would answer the phone when we call and say we had a concern, right? I actually personally called and said, hey, we gave your student a whole bunch of clothing, but she came back today, without, and it's cold, and this time it was January. It was single digits in Colorado. And so she was more or less where she was like, well, she just doesn't like that type of clothing. We appreciate the clothes and so forth, but it was still kind of eerie and odd. So one thing we did was, again, we went through the process of our district protocols. We then reported it to our social services, our social workers, who we then got those guys involved with. We have in the old city one of the many cities that I actually supported in my former county, they had a crimes against children's team, right? So when we're reporting this to social services, they get those guys involved. At that point, they kind of just said it wasn't a serious neglect, but it was a flag that they had raised as a yellow flag. However, I had an overzealous team who was just like, okay, let's hope that we can catch the parent, and we can go in and have the conversation with the parent. So they get to the bus stop one afternoon, and the young lady gets off the bus. She goes and she walks towards this vehicle. So my bus assistant's trying to be a little bit more than she needed to do, wanted to start to approach to have a conversation with the guardian. The young lady got into the car and they sped away. So They found it was strange. They again reported it to their local terminal and also to me. That's when we started to, again, have more conversations with local PD. And then local PD at that time was handling a task force throughout the pretty much the front range of Colorado. There was a huge rash of human trafficking activity happening, not just to adults, but also to children and students across the actual front range. So they started to have unmarked vehicles that was kind of at this bus stop for, it only took roughly, I think it was 3-4 days until they saw a pattern from this individual, how the student would get on the bus, get off the bus, stay in this car would be here, and there was a different gentleman who was there with her, picking her up almost every of those 3 days. They did their investigation work, as Lexi said. I was kind of told my bus assistants, it's not our job to investigate. I know you were trying to engage because you don't know what you're going to walk into. So that kind of went from a standpoint of where the local PD kind of got, they did their investigative work, their job of what they do, and they started to do their collaboration with other law enforcement agencies within the metro area that come to find out these people and these vehicles were attached to some other possible and abductions that was in the area. And then it went kind of just boom, it went big. And so we kind of was never given any kudos and don't want kudos. Our biggest thing was about taking care of that child, make sure the child was safe. So the child and the other students that was in the possessions of these individuals was roughly 8 individuals. And they were all taken away from their custody. And these individuals who had them were known as traffickers. They were arrested and prosecuted. And then again, the bigger thing that was across the entire front range this is kind of made the news here many years ago, and it was a domino effect. And so as my counterpart, who I knew at the local police department who was handling this, kind of gave us the insights in the background. So it was just where, with that whole situation, is when we became connected with TAT at that time.
Okay, so this was a student who wasn't living with their parents or guardians anymore. They were in this other environment they had been placed in because of what was going on with them.
Correct.
So you must have had drop-off zones, so you weren't going to a residence where you would have known that's not where the student.
Correct. It was a bus stop. It was a corner bus stop. So we had corner bus stops. So the student was considered a gen ed student. So they weren't getting home-to-home stop. It wasn't a sped stop. So we would always have, again, multiple students getting off. But then it was a bus where we had students with disabilities on it. That's why we had an assistant on the bus. And that assistant was very diligent. She was very much on top of it. Love her to pieces. And she was just very aware of what was going on. And she was reporting to me this was like we were Law and Order or something. She was like, I know something's going on. It's Law and Order, she was my Olivia. She was going out there trying to investigate. But we wanted to make sure she was safe. But she did, have such a care for those students that she was like, it was something going on. She knew something was wrong. So it was good. It was a good eye opener for us, and that was kind of led us to, we needed more training on this.
Yeah, and kudos to that driver for noticing something and saying something. So at that point, had you engaged with TAT already? Had you gone through any training or had resources, or was it just kind of spidey senses and then you
It was a spidey sense. It was a spidey sense, and that's what actually motivated us, because the following year we always had in-services where I was always trying to bring in someone who can help us to get a training focus and a more of awareness focus. So after we had this event happen, which this kind of started again in November, December, the situation came to a head right about March of that school year. So in August, when we had our in-service, I was searching right about that time for someone to come out. So I looked on the web. I was like, I got to find someone. And then Candace Paris she was a spokesperson for that time who was kind of out there doing a lot of the work. I reached out to her and she said, yeah, we were more than happy to do so. We would love to come over there. And so we she asked if she can do a video to kind of have something that talks about the next product they were trying to roll out, which was buses on the lookout, right? And then we was able to produce a video. And I always tell people that's the video where I still had a dark beard, and actually it's a story behind it that about how we were in a high school building that the AC went out, and it went out in the atrium where we were doing a lot of the filming. And with this hairdo, it's never fun to see the shiny, and we kept on having to take takes after takes. But it's kind of funny to see the video these many years later that it's still an effective tool in a way of helping to, translate to school bus industry, especially from a school district standpoint and a company standpoint of teaching and giving folks insights about this work.
Yeah, it was kind of this beautiful, perfect storm at that time where Greg was looking for the training. We were in the process. This was actually before my time at TAT, but I know TAT was in the process of thinking about the bus industry as a really key partner in this work, and what resources do we need to put together for them. And so Greg's district ended up being the first school district that we trained, and we were able to start creating some of those resources. And it was just incredible timing that it all came together. And now we get to see his face every time we play the video too.
No, just always want to give back.
And so, Lexi, now you have a lot more materials available for school districts specifically. How can you help districts if someone's watching this and they're ready for some training or resources?
Definitely reach out to TAT. That is our whole mission, right? So we provide free industry-specific training materials and resources. We have this whole set of school transportation specific resources that are basically made to be ready for implementation into your existing training systems. And so whether that's, at your in-service or in your onboarding process for new hires, or at your safety meetings, for your online learning systems, for all of the above, which is what we would love to see, right? We have that. It's now an 18-minute school transportation specific video. That original version that Greg helped create covered all of the bus industry. So it was motor coach, transit, school transportation, all in one bundle. And as we continued working with school transportation, we really recognized, this industry is so unique, especially in the relationship that you guys have with your passengers, to be able to really dive into that specifically. And so all of our resources are specifically for school transportation and how this issue intersects with that industry. Have free wallet cards that we can mail out that are that trainees can kind of take with them and carry with them with some of that information. Dash stickers, we have postcards, a toolkit, and all just meant to help you incorporate human trafficking training into your training plans for the year or ongoing training as well. We also have kind of a brand new revamped free online learning portal on our website. Okay. So any individual that's listening to this and thinking, gosh, I'd really like to get trained right away, can go to train.tatnonprofit.org and go through our school transportation training. So it takes about a half hour to finish. You get a certificate at the end of it, and can see that video and get some information there as well.
And we can go ahead and link in the video description directly to those pages for easy access. So, okay, Greg, you were a former transportation director. Did your district at the time have a policy around reporting human trafficking? I think you mentioned you were suspecting more neglect at the time, but what advice do you have for a district who doesn't yet have a school-wide policy? Maybe they at least want to get something in writing for their department.
So after that event, and we brought in, TAT to come in and do the work with us, we started our own we built a curriculum around it. And so it was part of the process for us is to start with the curriculum and then a procedure that was going to be an ongoing procedure for all drivers, all assistants, even our mechanics, and any person that was in transportation, that we wanted to start that with, because we all regardless, especially at this time where you have drivers, folks who are in the office driving, and you got mechanics driving. Right. They need to be aware and be alert to what's going on. So we did this and started that as part of our onboarding process, but also a continuous refresh. So, yes, you can do this one year and then maybe forget about it the next year, but then we're going to bring it back up in the middle of that second year. So, hey, folks, are we still here? Then that was actually where I worked with our human resources, worked with our legal team in a way of process, because whenever we had to write some type of policy or procedure for our department, I had to work within those tools because I thought it was something that we needed to do and something that we wanted to make sure we kept an eye on. Because, we worked with some other opportunities that kind of worked with that same concept of trying to be vigilant. Because at that time, we were going through not just about human trafficking, but just being more aware of how we protect our employees, our staff, because there's a lot of things that were happening at the bus stops that we wanted them to be so aware of their surroundings. But this was the first step that helped us to start doing that. It was an unfortunate situation that turned into a good thing, on the outcome, but it was something that helped us to be able to be more vigilant as we're doing our jobs. And again, it was not even just about bus stops. Are we paying attention to our surroundings as we're, parked at a school and seeing what's going on there? So this kind of worked where it started with us in transportation, and then it went to food nutrition services, custodial services. They're keeping the eyes out because the boss I had and the leader I had was chief operating officer, and he kind of made this kind of a filter this around to multiple departments under him to kind of be aware of what's going on. So we did a training program that went into procedures and policies and policies into actions that we did as something continuous to do. But I just tell people, you got to take that bull by the horns and do it yourself, and then make sure that you're bringing this to the decision makers above you, that this is something that is for the best interest and the safety of your students. And that's what every district should be promoting.
Absolutely. And so thanks to a lot of the work that you've been doing in this arena, you are now an advisory council member for TAT. What has that been like, and is there anything new you've learned?
I'm learning that we got a whole lot of smart people on this advisory committee that they're touching every industry. And I've had my first meeting a couple of months ago and have the next one coming up soon. And it's phenomenal to kind of learn about how each industry that TAC touches, you're just blown away of how many industries is affected by human trafficking. But then for us in school bus industry, what I love to see, and that's the influence that I always try to do when I'm somewhere. Like, for example, a meeting here in Colorado for the summit that we have coming up. Louis is going to stop by and he's going to share with some of the leaders of Colorado, the state of Colorado, who's going to be attending this meeting about, what's going on and how to start promoting this in their districts. I love having the opportunity to share, and also, again, the passion for this work. I said, again, Lexi and I think we connected a couple of years ago, and then I see her all the time. I'm like, you've got a busy schedule like I do. We keep crossing each other, going in different directions, but we're ending up at the same places. And every time you have a session, I'm like, that's the session to go to. Those other ones, don't forget about those. Make sure you go to Lexi's session over there, because you're going to learn something there. But again, I just love the work that they're doing, and they're becoming very visible in this industry. They're connected into making sure they're talking to policymakers, policy leaders in this industry. So it's just great to be a part of this advisory committee.
Amazing. Now, Lexi, to shift a little bit here, TAT hosts an award, the Harriet Tubman Award, that recognizes individuals who, spot human trafficking? Tell us more about how this works and how to nominate.
Yeah, so every year, TAT presents our Harriet Tubman Award to a member of the transportation industry whose direct actions have led to the prevention of human trafficking or the assistance of a potential victim of human trafficking. And the award is named for Harriet Tubman, who is, famed abolitionist, and we really believe that her legacy of bravery and leadership and commitment to justice is kind of at the foundation of TAT's mission and reflected in every recipient of the award, right? We usually have, I'd say pretty much every single one of our honorees have been like, well, I didn't do this for a prize, but The award serves as a really beautiful way to mark this industry's potential impact on the issue and the reality that everyone in these industries truly can be everyday heroes, and making one call or one report actually really can save someone's life and make a difference. And that's worth celebrating. So that's what the award is all about. It does come with a $5,000 prize for the honoree as well, and usually some kind of recognition at an industry event every year as well. So anyone that's wanting to be considered for the award, anyone that has made a report that has involved human trafficking or has, taken some kind of action, assisted a potential victim of trafficking, can nominate themselves or can nominate someone else that they know. They just have to submit a form on our website. It's up on our website now. And then TAT goes through them all and kind of vets them and talks to the nominees and talks to the agencies and companies that they're a part of, and gets more information before we select that honoree every single year. But just a really beautiful way to, like I said, mark the industry's impact on this issue, and the fact that we know that so many of our partners have invested on this issue and are taking actions every day that are making a difference.
Yeah. Is there a deadline to apply or to nominate?
So our main push for promotions are through July, but it is usually on a rolling basis. We want to hear about all of these success stories. So certainly don't hesitate to reach out if you have a case that you want to share with us.
Okay, great. And we'll link that below too. So let's kind of wrap up now. Big picture, this topic, if there's one key takeaway that you want someone to know about this issue related to our industry, what would that be?
Yeah, so the one thing that I always think is so important to share with the school transportation industry in particular, the conversations that I have with survivors, and often adult survivors who have gone through these situations as children and are now advocates and leaders on the issue. When I talk to them and I ask them, as you were going through these situations as a child and this was happening behind the scenes, who were the safe adults that you wish had the proper training to be able to do something? Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, a lot of times the school bus driver is someone that comes up, that they are someone that kid knew was a safe adult in their life and trusted that person, right, to get them safely from point A to point B. They knew that they cared about them. They maybe in a lot of situations have shared, I know my school bus driver was worried about me. He tried to take care of me. He maybe saved me a seat at the front of the bus so that I could sleep because I was always tired, or he asked me questions a couple of times. But that driver just didn't have the proper training. And maybe if they had, they would have probably done something about it. And if they had been able to connect what they were seeing to this issue and this reality and been able to make a report, it probably would have made an incredible difference in my life, and maybe ended that exploitation earlier than it did for me in those situations. And so really just to emphasize that you guys in school transportation, you play such incredible and important roles in these kids' lives, driving them to and from school every single day and being a safe adult in their life. And this is just one additional aspect and way that you in the industry can do that, and to be able to get trained and be ready to spot if this could be going on for a kid on your bus is just another way to be keeping them safe and taking care of them, which I know from the work that I've done with the industry is all that you guys want to do. And so would just make that call to action of get trained on this issue and be ready to use that, add that to your tool belt of the ways that we take care of the kids that you're transporting every single day.
Yeah. Greg, what do you want to add?
I know that school districts are always looking for trainings. They're looking for something to help their people to empower them. I would highly recommend that you take the time, especially if you're looking for ideals for some trainings of your team, of your training team, where you can get some trainer tools that you can then make this into a curriculum that you do on a regular basis. But I would I know that we're always looking at how can we protect our, our students, but this is also a great way of helping us be more aware of our surroundings. And so, again, I'm an advocate. I did it, and I know it works. And I can tell you, just from when you're a director or manager or a leader of an operation, of a school district department, that's one of the biggest things that your driver is always asking for. How can I keep my students safe? And this is a great tool, it's a great resource. Take advantage of it, because if you don't, you're taking a step back. And I guess the best takeaway is, if you want to keep your students safe, be aware, be focused, be alert, and be diligent that you're going to be doing this work. And what I say to people is, this is how you do it. It's a great step. It's a great tool. And then it grows into other areas. And then it also helps you partner with your safety and security department, help you with your local law enforcement, because you start to build those relationships when you're doing trainings, because when they realize you're doing this training, sometimes and most times they want to be involved with it. So I just say, take advantage of it. It's a great resource to have.
Yeah, great. Thank you both so much for your time and sharing about this issue. I hope we brought a little bit more of it to light and will help some more kids out there going through this. So.
Thank you for putting this together.
Hopefully this gave you some more insight into this issue and what you can do to help. Remember, if you see something, say something. A child's health and livelihood may be on the line, and you can make a difference by reporting red flags. Be sure to connect with TAT for help and resources. Check out the links below for key pages to get started. That's it for today, but you can find more school bus headlines and hot topics on our website anytime. Be sure to follow our YouTube channel and connect with us on social media. And a big thank you to our sponsor of the route, IC Bus, proudly offering vehicles and solutions that are ahead of its class. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for riding with us.